sister and I lived with our parents when we were young, just not both at the same time. Sometimes we lived with our dad, sometimes we lived with our mom, sometimes we lived with aunts and uncles, my grandma, different relatives. And it was like changing worlds. At my dad's house, we had cows. Sometimes we had pigs, and occasionally we had chickens. And I used to bottle feed those cows. We would buy the sickly ones, the calves and the pigs, at the auction and nurse them back to health. And then by the first grade, I knew how to make dinner for us, a can of spaghetti into the pan, and I knew how to make dinner for the calves, calf manna into a bottle, half a gallon size, with a nipple 4 inches long. And I'd take that out to the barn. And it was so little, I couldn't even hold it. I would wrap my arms like this. And if you've never bottle fed a baby calf, you might not know that baby calves like to head bonk the udder to bring the milk down. And so when you're holding a giant bottle like this, with a cow that is almost as tall as you are, and he head bonks you, you get a little blow to the chin. My dad loves to tell me how I would not go with the bottle, even though I was sitting there crying. He used to tease us with the pigs. He'd go into the pig pen, and he would pretend he was sitting on the pig having a beer. And everything was fine, and my sister and I were looking over the fence. And then he would just lightly rest himself right on that pig for just a second, and it would run away, and he would pretend to fall in the hay, and we would laugh. That was living with Dad. When we were with Mom, it was like going to Mars. Everything was Technicolor. Mom wore hot pink, and she would cook. We had pork chops, and homemade bread, and carrot loaf. Not everything she cooked was tasty. And she did crazy things like let us pick our own box of cereal at the store. Lucky Charms, here we go! So it was fun staying with Mom. Some nights we didn't have pork chops. We had a whole big bowl of ice cream for dinner. And Mom was prone to saying manic, crazy, happy things. When we'd get in the car and say, "Where are we going, Mom?" She'd say, "To the moon!" And I kind of believed her. And that might have something to do with the fact that we went a lot of places unexpectedly. Now that I'm an adult, my mom confesses that some of those changes of housing might have been defined by certain authorities as child snatching. Can I have the kids for the weekend, Dad? Okay. On an airplane off to Denver. She told us we were going to see Santa Claus. I was really disappointed that it was just her new boyfriend in Colorado, not the North Pole. When I was about to enter the 6th grade, we were living with Grandma. My dad had lost his job again. And he took me aside and sat me down and said, "Grandma's getting really old, and she really can't take care of you girls anymore." Now, I had seen Mom recently, which was unusual. Usually when we were with one parent, the other parent did not exist. They didn't call, they didn't write, we didn't know they were. So I'd seen Mom recently, she'd been around. So I thought, Lucky Charms, here we come. Instead, Dad said, "You're gonna go live with Uncle David and Aunt Eunice for a little while." And I started crying. And my dad said, "What's the matter, honey?" Well, I couldn't tell him. I thought we were gonna see Mom, because that would hurt his feelings. So I said, "There's ghosts on that farm." Then he laughed and laughed. There were no ghosts on this farm. What there were cows, which I was familiar with, and goats, lots of goats, because they breed like rabbits. One goat had 4 babies at one time. And shelties, which are little herding dogs that look like Lassie. And my uncle had a kennel of them, which he took to shows, dog shows. And he used them to keep the goats, because they would bust out of the field and into the neighboring field, which was a professional farm growing grass seed. And the goats would be on the loose, and the dogs would bring them back. Uncle David and Aunt Eunice taught us a lot of things when we lived there. Aunt Eunice taught me how to bake blackberry pie, which is still my specialty, and I do every summer. She taught us to take a shower every day instead of once a week. She bought us our first bras. Uncle David was the one, he was a 30-year 8th grade English teacher. He was the one who sat with my sister with her math homework while she cried and cried and cried because nobody told him that she had dyslexia until she was an adult. They were like that stable family that we never had. And we were young and accustomed to being shuttled from this place to that place, and we didn't know that an aunt or an uncle can love a child that isn't their child. We felt like sixth wheels. We tried not to ask for much, and we tried not to make much noise. And it wasn't until we grew up and had children of our own that I began to realize what it's like to know a little kid and watch them grow, and how an adult can feel about those children. We bring our children back to the farm even now. Now there are miniature horses, and they pick the apples that fall from the tree, and we go out to the barn and they feed them to the tiny little horses. We lived with a lot of people when we were young. I don't remember Aunt Barbara. She said that we stayed there with the cousins who famously once set a field on fire with me, their mother. She tells me we helped her in the garden with her 3 children. I don't remember that, but I love it that she still sends me cinnamon bears when I'm sad, and Hershey Kisses when it's Valentine's Day, and she made homemade Raggedy Ann and Andy dolls for my kids. She's like another grandma. And that is how it is with my aunts and uncles. They're like closer than aunts and uncles. They're like extra parents. Like I have more parents than anybody. Do I get time at the end for this? I never told my grandmother how I felt about her. She taught me about reading because she loved to read. She would read so much we could set the house on fire, she wouldn't even notice, just reading. And she used to read to us and encourage my love of reading. I never told her how much I appreciated her taking us in and making us drink that gross wheatgrass juice and all the things that she did for us, which is weird because she lived to be 93 years old. My Uncle David was recently diagnosed with lung cancer. I can't go and visit him right now because his immune system won't allow us to come into the house. So I would like to say to him now all the things that I know that he already knows, but that I want to say, that I can't go there and say in person. I want to tell him how, even though I washed out as a teacher, I'm glad I did it because I was like him and I know something more about him. And how my dogs are border collies, but I think it's because of him that I love herding dogs. And how much the stability of that home, it means to me that I can take my kids to a place where I grew up, where there are pictures of me in the house from childhood, and where my husband and my kids can eat the food that Aunt Eunice cooks, the same food she cooked for me when I was in 6th grade. Because Uncle David and Aunt Eunice did more than take in a scraggly pair of little girls. They gave us a home for life. And that is something, it's one of the best gifts anyone could ever give a child. And I hope to be able to thank all of my family and the people who helped me throughout my life in the same way. And I hope that you all make sure that you take the opportunity to say thank you to everyone in your lives that's really made a difference.